I should really first congratulate you for making it through to the last session on finance. It's really quite an achievement. What I'm going to do today is try and give you an overview in terms of the social finance market. I should warn you, I come from the dark side. I was a banker for 20, 25 years. And for the last 7, I've been specializing in social finance, which is how you bring the tools of modern finance into what I consider to be a very inefficient capital market. And what I want you to do this afternoon is throw out any conception that you have of what we understand by for-profit and not-for-profit. The issue which we face is, even here in Slovenia, is a retrenchment in the role of government. And it's driven strategically by the increasing aging of population. You'll be aware here in Slovakia that you're having that debate right at this point in time. Slovenia, sorry, my apologies. I put my foot in it there, my apologies. And in essence, it's a problem that's faced across most countries in Europe and the United States. In Japan's case and Germany's case, by the year 2050, 60 to 70% of the population will be over the age of 65. And if you want to look at the strains, here are the figures for Canada. This goes back to 1971 here. This is up to the year 2000. And you can see the strains as they pull further out over the next few years. Now, Canada happens to be the second best of any G7 country. And what that tells you is there is not enough money in the traditional paradigm of money cascading down, of government knows best, and essentially looking for that provision to come from the government. In terms of the aid development market, it means that, quite frankly, as people see their own benefits at home disappearing, that the money will dry up. So there is an absolute classical need to drive the tools of modern capitalism into the provision of services. But what is the mechanism that we currently use in terms of the for-profit, not-for-profit world? And you can see it over here on the graph on the left-hand side. That's the traditional not-for-profit world, and there's the traditional for-profit world. Now, I'm not really a financier, or a mathematician rather, I'm a financier, but not a mathematician. And you'll see money is allocated at minus 100%, which is a grant, which is when we give it away, which is either a grant system, which in the foundation world is roughly 99% of how we allocate that capital. And then the next position is plus 6% or beyond. Now, a lot of the things are actually, we try to fund, are actually in that bit in the middle. So there is really no mechanism, legal or financial, that allows you to transmit from not-for-profit to for-profit. If you think of social entrepreneurs as the R&D of society, they are essentially detached from the benefits that they create in a not-for-profit system. So as they create ideas and they create that value, as it gets moved into a not-for-profit environment, for-profit environment, they essentially get detached from that. If the ideas are successful, the community doesn't necessarily become a stakeholder in that solution as it comes forward. Very importantly, there are no collaborative mechanisms that allow for a collaboration between the not-for-profit, government, and the corporate world. We all think within our silos. The corporate world thinks of this as brand, maybe CSR. And sometimes bottom of the pyramid. Government tends to think of it within its own silo as well. And the social sector, again, thinks of it within its own silo. And it's even worse within the social sector is that we silo by issue as well. And the result of that is that when you look at this particular model here, and I'll give you the figures for the United States, but it would apply for most countries, you have a huge sector. The social capital market in the United States, for example, is estimated to be $1.5 trillion. But let me give you 2 shocking statistics in probably what is considered the most sophisticated market. In that market, the social capital market, and these are McKinsey Stanford figures, less than 0.007% of entities have reached $50 million of revenue or more, and only 3.8% of those entities have reached $10 million of revenue or more. So it's a very large sector, pitch smart by very considerable degrees of fragmentation. So it's not in essence the innovation, there's huge innovation within that marketplace, but it shows a categorical inability to move to any form of scale. If you look at the players within the sector and you go back 30 years in the for-profit world, you will see 30 or 40% of them in the for-profit world, the Dow Jones or the FT, are still left. The rest have gone. Creative destruction has been in play. You look in our sector, there is no creative destruction. You go back 20, 30 years, 40 years, you will find the same players. So how do you address that? Well, you need to begin to think about a funding paradigm that goes all the way across, from -100 all the way through to the process, that encourages that collaborative process between players. So how do you do that? Well, there is a whole range, and you've discussed part of it this morning, around new legal models. A very good paper, Aspen 2007, Thomas Biltieri. You'll see a range of that type of innovation. And in essence, there are three models in play. You touched on part of them this morning. One are public-private partnerships. The problem with that from the private sector, the public sector, and I would put this out in terms of a comment this morning, is that I have sat in a whole pile of meetings in the UK where people have said, well, we've got to go to government for money, but oh my God, they want us to do some ridiculous things. I don't know how we're going to get it. It's just very difficult to do. And a public-private partnership works very well. It gets for very large projects, but for our sector, it's actually quite difficult to do in the scheme of things. The second model you have in play, and again, it's a derivation of what you were talking this morning, are corporate structures that say you have a social corporate structure. Those are things like CIC in the UK, H-Corps, B-Corps in the United States, what you were partly again discussing this morning, and these are social entities that say the entity has a social purpose. Fine, again, works for a range of models, but again has its constraints. The third model that's in play, and I shall declare my interest here, is the use not just of corporate structures, but as the use of partnership structures. And there's an initiative in the United States called an L3C and an SELLP in the United Kingdom, a Social Enterprise Limited Liability Policy. And what those two structures allow you to have is different players taking different social economic return over the product life cycle. So let me repeat that. As opposed to having a grant model which disintermediates the community from their downstream benefits, that gives no mechanism which allows the corporate sector to engage in this sector clearly, this particular structure allows different players to take different and differing economic social return out of a structure going forward. And I would suggest those types of structures, which are now passing into law in the United States, are structures you should perhaps have a look at. The second thing, which is essentially social entrepreneurship, social finance, injecting modern corporate financial practices into social mission. If you think about financing, and I just actually had this conversation a moment ago, about a foundation model. What is a foundation model? There is a whole people, perhaps even people in this room, that believe the only mechanism that you can allocate capital with a social endeavour is called a not-for-profit organisation. A foundation is a closed-end investment trust that gives a certain percentage of its capital away for a tax break. That's all it is. And to argue that that is the only fiduciary mechanism or financial mechanism that can socially allocate our subsidy as a society is wrong in my view and constrains us from using the whole range of tools of modern capitalism and bringing them to the benefit of this market. So in some senses what social entrepreneurship and social finance is about is driving those modern practices into this space. Recognizing what the social sector builds. Question, should the social sector try to build the whole value chain itself? There are very successful models such as cooperatives that we heard about earlier today. But the social sector primarily brings innovation, it brings R&D, and it brings community ownership. And those are the core skills it drives as a potential stakeholder in a more global solution. Government. Government's role should be as a facilitator. It should be creating structures that are simplistic, give scale and replication. They should not be complex to the extent that the social entrepreneur on the ground, who's usually badly resourced, doesn't understand them. They should not be framed within a framework whereby it is legally difficult to do, because when you look at some of these structures, it requires you to integrate financial law, corporate law, charity law, and I'll tell you the lawyers make a lot of money out of this, but in terms of actually replicating that model, it is very difficult to do. Final point, capturing future cash flow. What we talk about in the sector is the ability to fund something. Where a lot of the value is actually in the creation of what we do. Now there's a structure that I've been involved in the UK called a social impact bond. What a social impact bond does, and it was done around prison reform, is monetize the value that is created. I'll explain it very quickly. It was done around the nature of prison reform. The reoffending rate for prisoners in the UK and the US is roughly around about 95%. Classic social sector, social entrepreneurial idea comes forward and says, if we actually mentor these people, then 2 months out, that drops to 45%. The problem is when you go to government, government says, well, whose budget do I cut or whose taxes do I increase to pay that? Nothing happens. So under this structure, the government makes a commitment to pay a private investor a return based on the reoffending rate. Now, what does that do? It means that government pays out a contingent return on the outcome. The private investor, who would be getting minus 100% return in this scenario, is getting a 13% return. In fact, he'll get a higher return if that social objective is delivered. And for the social sector organisation, as opposed to spending 50 cents on the dollar, and that's the dirty secret of our sector, 50 cents on the dollar, raising unleveraged, unannuitised income, they have long-term flows. What it also does is inject the forces of creative destruction, the forces of innovation into the sector, because you, in essence, put a premium onto the social valuation. That's the first one going live with the British government recently. Obama's just put a line of $100 million, if his budget passes, in terms of translating it to the United States. Worth looking. New intermediaries, I'll come on to that in a moment. I was asked to say something very quickly, and my time's probably running short, in terms of how the financiers are reacting to this marketplace. This is from UBS. You'll see that they've identified sanitation, healthcare, and mobiles as particular areas that they can see the provision of new services. Left-hand side, governance, I touched partly on that. European Union Foundation Law, CICs, SEOPs, all that innovation. And new investing models, layered financing models, front-loadings, social finance models. Happy to say more about those. So what essentially are the options for investors? Now, there are two traditional routes that people look. The one the financiers quite like, which is where you have the traditional model, which is, say, let's look at a range of funds, and we diversify across those range of funds. The problem with that for the investor is there's no touch and feel. A reason a lot of the investors invest in this market is for the emotional touch and feel. So it makes sense on investment level, but generally not very effective in terms of the personal feel people are looking for. The second is where you have a framework where the traditional foundation world, the touch and the feel, but all the inefficiencies of that particular world. You are seeing, and my apologies for the dovetailing has got a bit out of space, the bit at the bottom should be bigger than the bit on top, but you're seeing two other developments. One is invest in new intermediaries. There is a range of new intermediaries entering the marketplace that are redefining the relationship between the corporate sector, the government, and the not-for-profit world. Total Impact Advisors that I represent is exactly that type of entity. A chap called Ron Layton, using intellectual property, is another one. Willie Foote in the United States, using factoring microfinance. So there's a range of these new intermediaries that are fundamentally redefining the relationship between the two sets of players. The other development that you're seeing is a move in development from what are called input models, which is how government looks at it, how much money do I spend, to output models, how many hospitals do I build, to an outcome model. An outcome model asks a far more blunt question. How many children actually die in this particular area? Now, once agencies start paying as a function of outcome, what that does per se, by definition, is drive collaborative behavior. Because the element of our marketplace is, although we all talk about collaboration and we're all very nice to each other, the reality is in a capital market where we all spend 50 cents on the dollar raising unleveraged, unannuitized income, is that we don't collaborate. That's the practical reality. So the whole element of driving collaboration into the system is absolutely key. In the for-profit world, we are reaping the whirlwind of over-leverage. The not-for-profit world is essentially almost pre-capitalist. We don't even use any leverage in terms of allocating the capital, and it starves the players on the ground in terms of capital. So what you're also seeing as well is a development towards people asking about outcome models. And those outcome models, facilitated by some of the legal and financial tools I've touched on, will allow for greater collaboration. So very quickly, these are just some aspects of innovation that you'll see in the marketplace. The ones in purple I've been involved in, but markets only grow with transparency. One assumption in the social sector is that return is unitary. It is not. Different players can take different social economic return out of the same structure. We need to think about mechanisms that create incentives to drive to economies of scale. The Garvey bond is a $3 billion deal that captured future government cash flow, brought it forward, empowered the citizen sector, that dropped unit cost of injections from 50 down to 5. It is an issue of driving economies of scale in. Capture the value of the social externalities, ergo the value of what we create. I'll give you an example in sanitation that I'm involved in. If you look at that under the traditional paradigm, that's an $89 billion ask over 10 years to hit the MDG. That, however, creates, and these are OECD, WSP figures, actually $500 billion worth of social benefits. If you can monetize even a percentage of those, you change the dynamic of the market. I'm being beeped off, so I'll give you 2 more minutes. You need to empower and connect the community. Absolutely essential, the innovation that you're driving from the bottom. Use the skills and the resources of the for-profit sector. Look at JP Morgan, Deutsche, Nike. These are all companies that are now looking into this market. Change the legal framework. I mentioned the 3 legal paradigms that you touched on before. And look at the new intermediaries that are evolving in this marketplace. New intermediaries that are designed to extract the social value from that marketplace, that are redefining the fundamental 3-way relationship between the players. Strange enough, and my apologies for using Anglo-Saxon examples, I'm sure they're probably Slovenian examples. These are 3, there is remarkable political consensus. To quote Paul Martin, we have learned that entrepreneurship is an unbeatable force. Government unleashed the power of business entrepreneurs when it provided the wherewithal to succeed. What I would now ask is that government unleash the power of entrepreneurship. Or Gordon Brown, our objectives cannot be achieved by government alone, however well-intentioned, or by the private sector, or by generous NGOs or faith groups. It can only be achieved by a genuine partnership. Or David Cameron, I believe that this generation could see a revolution in our social economy comparable to the revolution of the commercial economy in the 1980s. Don't we need the same transformation in the social sphere that we've seen in the economic sphere? I wish I could have left that as my dying line, but I didn't. But I commend to you that we need to think about collaboration and working together. We will not solve these problems by working within our silos. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.